Welcome to the Bryan Foltice Behavioral Finance Podcast, where we unravel the mysteries of behavioral finance and unlock the secrets to making smarter, more informed decisions with your money. Now, here's your host, Dr. Bryan Foltice.
Welcome, everybody. This is the Bryan Foltice Behavioral Finance Podcast, and it is me today. We are going to be talking about a topic that has been messing with me since I learned about it in the spring. It's been messing with me all summer, and it is called the bias blind spot. So thank you very much for tuning in today. Happy to be back on the horse here, recording another podcast this summer. Had a little brief hiatus, which you can tell that means I'm having a great summer. Switching into summer mode here for a little while things calm down, knowing that as soon as the school year ramps back up, it goes from 0 to 100 literally over a weekend, and we get right back into it. And I've been sitting on this now for a couple of weeks and have been wanting to talk about this. What's interesting about this topic that we're talking about today is that this was introduced to me via presentation at the end of the semester in my behavioral finance class. Part of my behavioral finance class is we'll do a number of exams during the semester, and then as the final project, we'll do a topic, like a group of 2 or 3, and they'll do a presentation around their topic, and they'll write a paper on it. And I ask them to write on a topic that falls outside of what we cover in class. And I do this every semester, and this semester I had 2 sections of behavioral finance that just worked out that way. And one of the presentations was this bias blind spot. And I think it's fitting because this was a blind spot for me, and this was introduced, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, this absolutely needs to go into our curriculum because it has a lot of explanation and explanatory power as to how things work, why we feel the way we feel, and why others also feel the way they feel about their own beliefs and judgment making, beliefs in their own judgment making. So that's what we're going to unpack today. And before we start, though, I'm excited to announce that the first mini course for the behavioral finance content is now available, and you can buy that on bryanfoltice.com or go to my Stan store if you follow me on any of the social media platforms on BryanFoltice. You can come find me and get what we call now, this is the Foundations of Behavioral Finance, or Introduction to Behavioral Finance. And I believe there's around, say, about 2 to 3, 4 hours worth of video content along with worksheets and exercises to build a really strong foundation of behavioral finance, which I am very passionate about. And I'm also recognizing that I've been doing some research and looking, and I see little mini courses trying to touch on behavioral finance, and they're just dabbling around the edges. And I'm trying to take the course that I teach in my undergraduate and repackage it in a way that makes sense for financial professionals or people who don't have access to the Butler undergraduate course. And so that's what the intention is of me literally talking to myself in my office all summer, trying to build this content. And also I'm working on the Money Strong content through Butler as well, and we'll have some products available coming up here very shortly. So once again, this summer has been a little bit interesting in that I feel very busy, and people ask, okay, what have you been really busy with? And, I'll say I'm creating online content, but essentially I'm saying that I'm sitting in my office talking to my computer alone, and then when I'm not talking to my computer by myself, I'm thinking about how I'm going to talk to my computer by myself. And so I hope that there is a payoff and an impact on people at the end for my suffering here, or my mental exercise of insanity talking to myself over the summer. Anyway, let's get into our content today. The bias blind spot. There was a paper that came out, this from Princeton, and they found, this was Princeton University's Department of Psychology, Daniel Lin and Lee Ross. They found out of 600 people in the United States that were sampled, 85% of those individuals, more than 85%, believed that they were less biased than the average American. And then they found out that another roughly 15% were believed that they were similarly biased to the average American. Only one person out of 600 stated that they were more biased than the average American. And this is how we coined the term biased blind spot. And the bias blind spot is the tendency to see oneself as less biased than other people, or to be able to identify more cognitive biases in others than in oneself. 1 in 600 Americans believe that they are more biased than the average. So we've seen this overconfidence or inflated sense of abilities in other areas. So if you think about if you're a better driver than somebody else, most people think that they're a better driver than the average American driver. Similarly, in class, if you say, do you think you're going to be above average from the average of the class in whatever class that I'm teaching? Most people will raise their hand and say, yeah, I'll probably be above average in this. But 1 in 600 actually believe they are more biased, and everybody else believes they are less biased than the average American. And this bias blind spot. So I mentioned earlier that this is really messing with me because I am in the area of trying to teach people how to become less biased. And the struggle that I'm encountering here is, how do I teach people, or how do I get people to come and learn about this if 599 people out of 600 believe that they are less biased? They don't need it. Everybody else needs it, not me. And this has really been messing with me. So I almost want to start marketing this as, hey, come learn why everybody else is stupid or why everybody else is more biased, but not you. We're just going to learn everybody else's biases. And maybe that will draw more people into the products or the content that I've been creating here over the summer. But anyway, as this has been messing with me, I've been thinking about, okay, what drives myself to think that I'm less biased, or what drives other people, of course, to think that they are less biased. And that's where we're going here today, trying to understand this. And so we have some ideas about maybe why this is, and it comes along the lines of, when we are thinking about a particular topic or are giving some sort of opinion on something, we believe that we have given it considerable thought around this particular topic. And we also then assume that everybody else has not given it the same amount of thought into this particular topic. And so therefore, I've given this considerable thought. People probably haven't thought about this as much. Easily, I'm going to be less biased, even though there's a great potential of misinformation, of not really understanding it, or just the fact that other people have also given it considerable thought as well, and you may just be off more than everybody else. And so we think about some different examples here. I already mentioned the driving, but sometimes what do you think about texting and driving? I'm a good texter and driver. And so we think that we're really good at this. And this always messes with me when I'm doing this. If I ever try to be tempted to try this, do you realize when you are texting and driving, your eyes, where they go and for how long? Just for a simple text, your eyes are down for a very long time, and you kind of pop up and you go, oh, I'm glad nothing ever happened because shit, my eyes were off the road for, a while. Whereas if I have a cup of coffee, I have this tendency of taking a coffee, and here's my overconfidence is I have a cup of coffee and I don't like the metal taste of the to-go cups. And I have plenty to-go cups in my cupboard, but I like the open mug, and I'll risk it to drive with the open mug. And even going down the curbs of my neighborhood to get outside of my house, I'll take it and kind of adjust my wrist, and I'll take the bump. But I want to have an open coffee mug. But even if I can navigate it and not spill it, well, I can still sip my coffee mug and still keep my eyes on the road. So I'm way more impaired with my texting and driving. And if you have me in class and you ever see a monster coffee stain on my shirt, you'll know it's from my overconfidence in coffee drinking on my way to class. Anyway, another one is we've got this whole thing on scrolling on social media. Kind of call it doom scrolling, but essentially just scrolling on different things where we don't think we are getting sucked in, or we don't think we're susceptible to this, but we are spending more and more time, and ironically, it's making most of us, way dumber than smarter. So we have these devices that have all the power and information in the world, and they're just numbing our minds. And so, of course, I'm trying to recognize that, okay, I teach biases, and I'm supposed to not be biased, and so I'm going to put some different mechanisms in my life, and I'm going to I'm going to be Andrew Huberman here, and I've got my water that I drink in the morning and sunlight and all this, and like, okay, come on, man. I get this is the optimal thing to do, but so you kind of find some balance around that. And one of the things I do is instead of scrolling, I designate time when I'm on the toilet to scroll. And of course, my wife expects at least 2 or 3 good reels to be sent her way, and she expects me to reply to hers, and that's my time that it's expected. And so I also have, you kind of get into this and go, I'll just do it. I'll multitask, whatever. And when I'm going to the bathroom, and then you realize that, oh shit, I'm getting sucked into this as well when you stand up and both legs are numb and you're just like, whoa, what happened? So I totally get that. I understand this bias blind spot as well. I'm trying to rise above it, and I still fall into these traps. I'm also sharing way too much information with my viewers at this moment, and I totally understand if you want to just jump ship at this point. But anyway, there's scrolling, there's texting and driving. Moving into the world of investments or financial picking, you also get this sense of, I'm a really good stock picker. And if you've had any luck, I just had a student come and talk to me about they bought into NVIDIA last summer, and now they're trying to figure out what to do with the stock because it's risen so much and it's become a larger percentage of their overall portfolio than originally started. And again, this was a fantastic conversation to have because of the run that NVIDIA stock has had over the past year. But again, if you have one of these winners, you're going to really feel like, hey, I'm a really good stock picker. And one of the open areas of behavioral finance that if anybody is wanting to join into this world and have an aspiration of winning a Nobel Prize, I will challenge you to figure out a way to decipher between skill and luck in any area, whether it be stock performance, whether it be life performance. How do we measure skill or luck? And what weights do we give them in somebody's either success or failures? And once again, this is an open area that if somebody can crack this and convincingly enough prove it, then there's a Nobel Prize, I believe, for this particular topic. In the meantime, we don't know. And so we have to somehow navigate in our own minds whether or not we just got lucky or did we actually have a really good skill for stock picking or whatever we're touting here. Same thing, final example here is in fitness and with our diet. And so we feel like, oh, look, we're really doing the right thing and really we have our act together. And for me, it's like I've been on and off with drinking alcohol this year. And I always convince myself, man, if I just work out enough, then I can offset any drinking that I do during the day. And once again, you stand back and you go, no, come on, you just get in line with it. If you're going to work, then give your body what it needs to replenish itself and take good care of it. And then your fitness gets better. And then they're working together, not in conflict, trying to net to zero. And so once again, I'm in the world of debiasing and trying to teach people about biases, yet I'm struggling with the same thing. So once again, this is really a fascinating topic for me. And perhaps I'm giving you more questions than answers around this, but I really wanted to start the conversation in your mind about what your biases are. What are you struggling with, or what are you thinking about along these lines? So as we move into this, we try to understand why we have this, and the bias blind spot kind of comes from this previously mentioned confirmation bias, where we seek out information that we already know. This helps us feel better about ourselves, easy on the mind. It takes us, but it definitely entrenches us into these beliefs that are more bold and may or may not be correct, but they're definitely giving us more emboldened thoughts on this. And there's another bias here that I want to introduce you to called the self-serving bias. And the self-serving bias says that we ascribe success to our own abilities and efforts and our failures to external factors. Our successes are due to our own abilities and efforts, and failures are because of somebody else, some other external factor. That is the self-serving bias. And we've talked about the self-attribution bias, where we like to embellish our triumphs and then we minimize some of our defeats. But this self-serving bias actually struck me as very interesting. And we see this all around when we have something that is successful. Oh man, I really worked hard. I put some good effort into it, and I can thank myself for this. And then when we fail at something, then it's somebody else's fault, or something happened that's beyond our control. And we have a reason that we didn't succeed in it. And man, it was really interesting when I did a topic a few weeks ago on the poll that had half of Americans believing that we're in an economic recession and have been for the last 4 years, and that the stock market is still down, even though the stock market has been up double digits easily over the last 3 years since 2020. And I also noticed that Ramit, I want to teach you to be rich guy, author, he's out there and he was doing a similar topic, and he happens to have a way larger following that I have. And what's, I guess, the double-edged sword around that is when he was talking about this topic, the comments that were coming were from people who they were saying a number of different things, but almost it was to the point where you could tell people who were not successful and they were either going to went personal on him and said he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's so disconnected from reality. They were just push external factors onto him. And then some were also even stating that the economic data is not true, it's falsified, and that there's, theories around this. But once again, we're conjuring up whatever other external factors there are. And I just read down the list, and he's entertaining it too, and I'm going, oh man, I don't. Maybe it's fine that I don't have the same amount of reach that he has at this point, because I might lose my shit in the comment section. But anyway, I just found it really, really interesting to see the self-serving bias really play out when things are contradictory or negative to what people think. So this opposite end of the confirmation bias is our cognitive dissonance. And so when we see conflicting information and somebody presenting it, people just freak out and they'll just jump on the comments and just start annihilating somebody. And you really kind of show your cards in this. And anyway, I found it really fascinating how it all plays out, and the self-serving bias is now a new thing that I've been thinking about as well that I haven't seen. All right, let's wrap it up here. We've talked about this enough. So let's try to talk about how we might be able to overcome this blind spot, this bias blind spot. And really the understanding of overcoming this is to raise our own awareness on our own. And to understand, look, I'm not going to jump onto comments and try to change somebody's mind about something as much as I feel tempted that I might be able to. It's more or less trying to observe it. And that's why I like to talk about this on a podcast, just to talk about my observations, what I see. Also make sure that everybody, even if it requires a few graphic examples, that they understand that I'm going through this as well. But to have that self-awareness and to understand, hey, look, the scrolling on the toilet or whatever you're doing is, you're just as susceptible wherever you're doing this, and you have to be careful. Same thing with the fitness and drinking. It's like, hey, if we're going to take care of ourselves in the gym, take care of yourself in all over in life. And we want to live a long, happy life. So this awareness, though, it all starts with that. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Think about some of the biases that you might have, or where you might be going down a confirmation bias rabbit hole on social media, and just be aware of that. I think that's the first step to becoming better. And then the second step is, once we have our own self-awareness and exploration, that we try not to compare ourselves or judge others. And that's where sometimes I struggle and have struggled. I've gotten a lot better in not comparing myself to others, but just accepting myself. And there's enough to work on right there without having to think about anybody else. And when I can get to that point, then I can really become happier myself, and then I can make other people happier or be a better presence around them. And so if I don't compare to others and say, well, you all are really stupid, even though I can see it sometimes in comments, and judging others, that's the other thing. It's like, all right, they have their own comments, they have their own ideology. leave it at that. I'm not going to emotionally entertain that. I'm not going to jump in any way. They can say what they want to say. It's my job to just disassociate or disconnect from that. So perhaps I'm off base with that. Maybe there's another strategy that I could intervene with. And if that's the case, I'm happy to hear from you. Just let me know. Otherwise, those are my closing remarks. I hope that helps a little bit. It's a really interesting topic, and it's definitely going into the core curriculum of my behavioral finance class here when the fall semester starts. So thank you if you made it this far for listening, and really appreciate you. If you have any comments, I would love to hear from you. There's actually a text that you can send right underneath the description here. So if you have any comments, I would love to hear from you. I know I've heard from a number of you, and it really makes me happy and feel like it's worthwhile. It also gives me new ideas to talk about, which I'm always thinking about and wanting to articulate here in my workshop, which is this podcast. And if you want to check me out online, you can find me on Instagram, Bryan Foltice. It's Dr. Bryan Foltice. On Facebook, Dr. Bryan Foltice. TikTok, I'm there too. LinkedIn, all Bryan Foltice, Bryan Foltice. Reach out to me in any way. Would love to hear from you. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Bryan Foltice Behavioral Finance Podcast. We hope you found our exploration into the fascinating world of human behavior and finance both enlightening and thought-provoking. Be sure to subscribe for future episodes. And until next time, stay curious and financially savvy.